She only wanted a little sugar, but a door opened to a forbidden desire that would change her life forever. In a building where everyone watches and no one forgives, dirty secrets lurk behind the curtains. What happened in apartment 304 will shock you to the last drop of this story. If intense and unexpected love stories like this touch your heart, subscribe to our channel and comment on what you thought. Every day we post new plots that move and surprise. Discover now the romance that no one dared to live. The Art Deco building on Magnolia Street stood like a monument to time that passed too slowly. Its peeling walls held decades of secrets, like a collective confessional where lives intertwined through narrow, echoing corridors under cold lights. Each door seemed like a locked gate to a small domestic hell, but all invariably had a peephole. Neighbors watched everything like invisible jailers. For Amber, the building had always been a prison disguised as freedom, a place where gazes weighed more than locks and whispers were as sharp as chains. At 23, Amber occupied apartment 302, a small space full of white lace and the smell of soap, a capsule where she still pretended to be the obedient girl molded by her grandmother. She'd been raised believing her body didn't fully belong to her, but to someone life would designate when the right time came. But there was something in her flesh, perhaps an ancestral instinct, perhaps just the hunger to feel, that throbbed every time her steps crossed the door of 304. Jack. He wasn't just older, divorced, and bitter. He was a man with a past that no one knew completely and a presence that no one could ignore. At 40, with his unkempt beard, worn blue eyes, and a shirt always half unbuttoned like someone who never completely closed himself off to chaos, Jack didn't hide his loneliness. He wore it like a bitter perfume, leaving in the air an indecent invitation to those who dared to breathe deeply. Amber worked as a secretary at a dental clinic in downtown Boston, waking up every day at 5:30 in the morning to catch 2 buses to Beacon Street. Her routine was a predictable cycle: work, home, work, home. On weekends, she cleaned her apartment and visited her grandmother Eleanor in Cambridge, always carrying a pot of homemade caramel and the same questions about dating that she deflected with forced smiles. Her grandmother insisted that Amber should find a family boy, someone who attended church, who had a steady job and serious intentions. "A proper young lady doesn't stay alone," she repeated, adjusting the cushions in the living room as if each gesture were a moral lesson. Amber listened in silence, but inside she rebelled against that planned life, against that future that seemed more like a sentence than a choice. Jack was everything her grandmother would consider inappropriate. Former university professor fired over a scandal that no one in the building knew exactly what it was. Now he lived off translations and small freelance jobs. He had the thin body of someone who ate poorly, the nicotine-stained hands of someone who smoked too much, and the eyes of someone who had lost more than he was willing to tell. He didn't attend church, didn't have a steady job, and his intentions were a mystery that Amber burned to decipher. She watched him from her kitchen window as he smoked in the service area, always around 10 at night. Jack would stand there, contemplating Boston's dirty sky as if looking for something he would never find. Sometimes when the wind changed direction, Amber could smell his cigarette entering through her window, and that aroma mixed with her dreams in ways that made her wake up with her heart racing. The building buzzed with gossip about him. Mrs. Carter from 201 whispered that he received strange visits in the middle of the night. Mr. Johnson from the ground floor told stories that Jack sometimes left and only returned after days, always with a small suitcase and the air of someone fleeing from something. The building manager, Ms. Diane, a retired lawyer who lived with 7 cats, openly said he was a risk to the morality of the building and that they needed to find a way to get rid of him. Amber listened to everything in silence, pretending to agree with the malicious comments, but inside she felt a strange protection for this man she barely knew. Perhaps it was compassion. Perhaps it was just the fascination with the forbidden. Or perhaps it was something deeper, the recognition of a loneliness that mirrored her own. On the night Amber knocked on his door asking for sugar, something inside her broke. She didn't need sugar. She just wanted to see, for the first time without the veil of conventions, the man who haunted her dreams. She had rehearsed the excuse for hours, looking at herself in the bathroom mirror, fixing her hair, applying light lipstick that she later wiped off for fear of appearing too bold. The hallway had never seemed so long as on that night. Each step echoed like thunder, and Amber was sure that all the neighbors could hear her heart beating. When she finally stopped in front of door 304, she stood there for long minutes, her hand raised, unable to knock. What would she say? How would she explain her presence there, so late, so inappropriate? He opened the door with a tired smile, and for a moment, she was certain that she wasn't standing before a neighbor, but before an abyss that called her by name. Jack wore only faded jeans, his bare chest revealing a scar that cut across his right shoulder like an unanswered question. His blue eyes surveyed her from top to bottom, not with malice but with a genuine curiosity that made her feel both exposed and desired at the same time. "Sugar?" he asked, and Amber realized there was something playful in his voice, as if he knew this was just an excuse. "I was making a cake for tomorrow," she lied, and the lie came out so naturally that she almost believed it herself. Jack stepped away from the door, a silent invitation for her to enter. The apartment was exactly as she had imagined, messy but not dirty, full of books piled on the floor, papers scattered across the table, a guitar leaning against the wall. It smelled of strong coffee and cigarettes, a masculine scent that made her feel strange in her own skin. "What kind of cake?" he asked, rummaging through the kitchen cabinets. "Chocolate," she replied, and this time she wasn't lying. It really was her favorite recipe. He found the sugar and handed her a full cup, but when their fingers touched, Amber felt an electric current run up her arm. Jack must have felt it too, because he stood there, holding the cup together with her, his eyes fixed on hers as if trying to decipher a code. "You didn't come here for sugar," he said, and it wasn't a question. Amber should have denied it, should have thanked him and run away. But something in his voice, a vulnerability that contrasted with his rough appearance, made her stay. "No," she admitted, her voice coming out lower than intended. Their first night together was a contained fire. They sat in the dim light, exchanged hesitant phrases and silences that said more than they could bear. Jack offered her coffee. She accepted even without wanting it. And they stayed there, on the worn sofa, talking about trivial things, the weather, traffic, noisy neighbors, while a palpable sexual tension grew between them. He told her he was from Hartford, that he had moved to Boston after his divorce. She said she had lived in the building since childhood, that she dreamed of traveling but had never left the city. Superficial conversations that only served to fill the space while their bodies communicated in an older and more honest language. When they finally touched, it was like tearing a veil that Amber had carried since she was a girl. Jack wasn't gentle, not in the way she expected from a first encounter. He kissed her hungrily, desperately, like a man who had gone a long time without water and finally found a source. His hands roamed her body with an urgency that both frightened and excited her. Amber responded with equal intensity, surprising herself with her own boldness. She had always imagined she would be shy, hesitant, the first time with a real man. But there, in Jack's arms, she discovered a version of herself she didn't know, a woman who bit, who scratched, who asked for more when she should ask for less. When he undressed her, it was as if he was stripping not just her clothes, but all the lies she had been told about what it meant to be a woman. Her body responded with a mix of fear and ecstasy, like a flower open under a storm. Jack touched her as if she were precious and dangerous at the same time, and for the first time in her life, Amber felt completely alive. They made love on the couch, then on the floor, then against the kitchen wall. Each time was different, each time more intense, as if they were trying to recover years of loneliness in a single night. Amber discovered that her body was capable of pleasures she didn't know existed, that she could be strong and fragile at the same time, that she could take as much as she gave. When they finally separated, it was almost dawn. Amber dressed in silence, aware that something in her life had changed forever. Jack watched her from the bed, smoking a cigarette, his blue eyes shining in the half-light. "You know this can't happen again," he said, and there was pain in his voice. "Why?" she asked, even knowing the answer. "Because you're too young, too good, and I've ruined good things before." Amber approached the bed and kissed his forehead, a tender gesture that contrasted with the savagery of the night. "Let me decide what's good for me," she whispered. and left the apartment without looking back. In the hallway, morning was beginning to dawn through the dirty windows. Amber climbed the stairs as if floating, still feeling his smell on her skin, his taste in her mouth. When she reached her apartment, she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and saw a different woman. Swollen lips, messy hair, eyes shining with a new secret. She took a long shower, letting the hot water wash her body unhurriedly. Each mark he had left on her skin was like an invisible tattoo, a memory she wanted to carry forever. When she finally lay down, it was already 6 in the morning, and she would have to get up in an hour for work. But she couldn't sleep. She lay there, looking at the ceiling, reliving each moment, each touch, each word. She knew she had crossed a line that could no longer be erased, that she had discovered something in herself that she could no longer hide. And as much as she tried to convince herself that it had been just one night, a passing weakness, Amber knew she was lying to herself. That had been just the beginning. The next day, guilt came like a whip. Amber woke up with her body still aching, invisible marks that seemed to pulse under her skin. She tried to concentrate on work, but memories of the previous night haunted her like ghosts. Dr. Parker, the dentist she worked for, commented that she looked different, with a smile she didn't know whether was innocent or malicious. "Sleep badly, Amber? You have a face. How can I say, like someone who discovered something new?" She looked away, pretending to organize the medical records, but felt her face burning. It was as if the whole city could see what had happened, as if she carried a mark on her forehead that screamed her transgression. On the bus back home, each movement of the vehicle reminded her of Jack's hands. Each curve was a memory of how he had touched her. She arrived at the building in the late afternoon and climbed the stairs slowly, her heart racing, hoping for some sign from him. But the hallway was silent, and door 304 remained closed like a well-kept secret. The eyes in the hallway followed her, relentless. Mrs. Carter was watering the plants on the balcony when Amber passed, and gave her a strange look, as if she could smell the sin. Mr. Johnson, who always greeted all the residents, just nodded his head, his eyes suspicious. Even the building manager, Mr. Wilson, seemed colder than normal when they crossed paths in the elevator. "Good afternoon, Amber. Are you okay?" "I heard some strange noises last night." The phrase was said with apparent innocence, but Amber noticed the malice behind it. She mumbled an excuse about dropping something in the kitchen and practically ran to her apartment. Once inside, she leaned against the door and took a deep breath, trying to calm her hammering heart. It was then that she saw the first note, slipped under the door, a white paper with thin, almost elegant handwriting. Amber picked it up with trembling hands and read the words that would change everything. "He will destroy you as he destroyed all the others." There was no signature, just that delicate handwriting that seemed written with poison. Amber read the phrase several times, feeling a chill in her stomach. Who had written that? How did someone know about the previous night? And what did all the others mean? She crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash, but couldn't get it out of her mind. She tried to cook, watch TV, read a book, but the words of the note echoed in her head like a sinister mantra. Around 10 at night, when she was almost managing to distract herself, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart raced, and she approached the door, pressing her ear to the wood. It was Jack. She recognized his heavy footsteps, the noise of keys. She stood there, breathing slowly, wondering if he would stop in front of her door, if he would knock, if he would look for her. But the footsteps continued, and she heard door 304 close with a definitive click. The night was long and sleepless. Amber lay in bed, looking at the ceiling, reliving every moment of the previous night, but now with a new perspective. The words of the note mixed with the memories, creating doubts where before there was only desire. Who was Jack really? What secrets did he hide? And why did someone care enough to warn her? The next day, more notes appeared. The second was stuck to the elevator mirror. Ask him about Rachel. Ask why she disappeared. Amber quickly tore off the paper, looking around to see if anyone was watching her. The elevator was empty, but she felt exposed, as if invisible cameras captured her every move. She put the note in her purse and tried to continue her day normally, but the name Rachel hammered in her mind like an obsession. The third note was on her desk when she arrived at the clinic. There was no denying it anymore. Someone was following her, studying her routine, planning each move. The handwriting was the same, delicate and venomous. She also thought she could save him, also believed she was special. Amber felt nauseous. She ran to the bathroom and vomited, her hands trembling as she held onto the sink. Dr. Parker knocked on the door, concerned, but she said she was fine, that she must have eaten something bad. She went home early that day, pretending to be sick, but in reality, she was terrified. The building seemed different now, threatening. The corridors echoed with imaginary whispers, the shadows seemed to move, and each neighbor had become a suspect. Amber began to observe everyone with different eyes. Was it Mrs. Carter with her small, malicious eyes? Was it the building manager, Ms. Diane, with her obsession with morality? Or perhaps it was someone she didn't even suspect, someone who watched her in silence? For the rest of the week, the notes continued to appear. In the mailbox, stuck to the windshield of a car she didn't even own, slipped under the door during the night. Each one more sinister than the previous, revealing details about Jack that she didn't know. He was a professor, lost his job for pursuing a student. Rachel was 19, just like you when you arrived here. He says he loves, but he only knows how to destroy. There are already 3 women who disappeared from his life. Do you want to be the 4th? Amber kept all the notes in a box under the bed, reading and rereading obsessively. Part of her wanted to confront Jack, demand explanations, but another part was dying of fear. What if the notes were right? What if she really was in danger? She tried to research Rachel on the internet, but without a last name, it was impossible to find anything. She searched for news about fired professors, harassment cases, any clue that could confirm or deny the accusations. She found nothing concrete, but doubt had installed itself in her mind like a parasite. The relationship with Jack became a strange dance. They met in the hallways, exchanged looks loaded with meaning, but neither took the initiative. Amber wanted to run to him, but she also wanted to flee. Jack seemed to be waiting for some sign from her, but at the same time kept his distance, as if he knew it was dangerous to get closer. It was during one of these tense afternoons that Amber decided to do something she had never done before: investigate on her own. She waited until she was sure Jack had gone out, went down to the reception desk, and talked to Mr. Johnson, the doorman. He was a simple man who knew the life of every resident and liked to talk. "Mr. Johnson," she began, trying to sound casual. "How long has Mr. Jack lived here?" "About 2 years," he replied, polishing the building keys. "Arrived pretty down, poor guy. Said he had lost everything, that he needed to start over." "Lost everything? How?" Mr. Johnson looked around, as if to make sure no one was listening to them. "Look, Amber, I don't like to talk about other people's lives, but that man carries a heavy sadness. He already arrived here kind of broken, you know. Sometimes I see him smoking in the common area, and he always seems to be fighting against something." "What kind of thing?" "Not sure exactly, but once he received a call and I heard him crying. Really crying, you know. Grown man, crying like a child. After that, he became even quieter." Amber felt her heart tighten. Maybe the notes were wrong. Maybe Jack was just a suffering man, not a predator. "Has he received visits? Women?" Mr. Johnson thought for a moment. "Not that I remember. He just receives some envelopes sometimes, and he always gets very nervous when mail arrives. Once a woman called here asking if he lived here. When I said yes, she hung up on me." "What was her voice like?" "Young. She seemed nervous, even scared." Amber felt a chill. Was it Rachel? Was she alive, trying to find Jack? Or was it another woman who had crossed his path? That night she couldn't sleep. She stood by the window watching the service area, waiting for Jack to appear to smoke. When he finally came out, around midnight, she felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. He looked different, thinner, more tired. He stayed there for almost an hour, looking at the sky as if searching for answers in the stars. It was then that Amber made a decision. She went down to the service area, her heart beating hard. When he saw her, his eyes lit up, but also showed surprise. "Amber," he said, putting out his cigarette. "Are you okay?" "I need to know something," she said, without beating around the bush. "Who is Rachel?" Jack's expression changed completely. The color drained from his face, and he leaned against the wall as if he had been punched. Who told you that name? Does that matter? Just tell me who she is." Jack ran his hand through his hair, his eyes avoiding hers. Rachel is a former student of mine when I still taught at the university. And what happened to her? It's complicated, Amber, very complicated, then uncomplicated. Because someone is sending me notes about you, about her, and I need to know if I should be afraid. Jack looked at her with an expression of deep pain. Notes? What kind of notes? Amber showed him some of the papers she carried in her purse. Jack read them in silence, his expression growing increasingly somber. Damn, he muttered. She found me. Who found you? Rachel? No, Amber. Someone much worse. And it was then that he began to tell the story that would change everything between them. Rachel wasn't just a former student. She was an obsession that almost destroyed his life. A brilliant, troubled young woman who fixated on him in an unhealthy way. She began to show up at his house, to call in the middle of the night, to invent emergencies to be near him. I tried to keep things professional, Jack explained, lighting another cigarette with trembling hands. But she wouldn't accept boundaries. She went so far as to invent that we had a relationship, spread it to other students, to colleagues. When I rejected her definitively, she tried to kill herself. Amber felt her blood freeze. And then she disappeared, left the city, changed her name, started a new life. I thought it was over. I lost my job, my reputation, my marriage. I came to Boston to start over. But it seems she's still watching me. You think it's her who's sending the notes? Or someone close to her? Rachel always had a very protective family, especially her older sister, Emily. She blamed me for everything, said I had destroyed her sister's life. Amber absorbed the information in silence. Part of her felt relieved. Jack wasn't a predator, just a victim of an obsession. But another part felt even more frightened. If Rachel or her sister were indeed behind the notes, how far would they be willing to go? Why didn't you tell me this before? She asked. Because I didn't want you to see me as a broken man. Because I thought that here, with you, I could be different. Better. Jack moved closer to her, and Amber didn't back away. When he touched her face, she closed her eyes, feeling all the tension of the week dissolve. I won't let anyone hurt you, he murmured. Not because of me. They kissed right there, in the service area, surrounded by the night and by secrets. But this time there was something different in the kiss. A hopelessness, an urgency, as if they knew time was running out. When they separated, Amber saw tears in Jack's eyes. Maybe it's better for you to stay away from me, he said, before it's too late. But Amber had already made her decision. She took his hand and led him to her apartment, determined not to let ghosts from the past destroy the present. They made love with even greater intensity than the first time, as if each touch were a declaration of war against whoever was trying to separate them. Later, while Jack slept beside her, Amber stayed awake, thinking. She knew the notes wouldn't stop, that whoever was behind this wouldn't give up easily. But she also knew she couldn't abandon Jack, not now that she knew his story. The next morning she found the most frightening note yet. Now you know the truth and still stayed. That's what hurts the most. But don't worry. Soon you'll understand why all of us tried to warn you. This time the message came with a photo. A photo of Amber and Jack in the service area, kissing. The image was clear, taken from a window in the building. Amber felt her legs weaken. Whoever it was, they were there, in the building, watching, waiting. The hunt had begun, and she no longer knew who was the predator and who was the prey. The photo changed everything. Amber could no longer leave the house without feeling invisible eyes on her, could no longer sleep without checking the locks 3 times. The building, which had always been her prison, had now become a battlefield where she didn't know who were allies and who were enemies. She studied the image obsessively, trying to figure out which window it had been taken from. The angle suggested it came from above, probably from the 4th or 5th floor. This limited the suspects, but not enough to give certainty. Amber began to observe each neighbor with different eyes, looking for signs, strange behaviors, any clue that would reveal the identity of her stalker. Mrs. Carter, from 201, had always been gossipy, but now her smiles seemed full of malice. When they crossed in the hallway, the woman greeted her with exaggerated sweetness, her small eyes shining with something Amber couldn't decipher. "How are you, dear? You look a bit pale, don't you think? Perhaps you should take better care of yourself, a young woman like you." The building manager, Ms. Diane from 401, was more direct in her hostility. From the beginning, she had always made it clear that she considered Jack a bad influence on the building. "People like him attract problems," she would say during condo meetings. "Men without family, without roots, always hide something." Now, when she saw Amber, her feline eyes narrowed with barely disguised disapproval. But there were other residents that Amber had never noticed before. The woman from 502, a frail-looking lady who always wore dark clothes and walked silently through the corridors. The man from 403, who seemed to work from home and was always at the window when Amber came home from work. Even the young couple from 301 began to seem suspicious. They were new to the building and nobody knew much about them. Jack had also changed. After that night in the service area, he became more cautious, more protective. He checked the hallway before leaving his apartment, accompanied Amber to the elevator door when she went to work, and several times she caught him observing the windows of other apartments, as if trying to identify where the gazes came from. "We're being hunted," he said one afternoon as they drank coffee in his kitchen. "Whoever it is, they know our routine. They know when we're together, when we're apart. What can we do? Maybe we should go to the police." Amber laughed bitterly. "And say what? That someone is sending us notes? That they photographed us kissing? They'll think we're paranoid." Jack knew she was right. The notes by themselves didn't constitute a clear criminal threat, and he, with his past, would automatically be viewed with suspicion by the police. It was then that the notes began to get more specific, more personal. The next appeared on her desk at the clinic, and Amber immediately knew that whoever it was had crossed a dangerous line. "Your grandmother Eleanor must be very proud of the little granddaughter she raised with such care. Does she know what kind of man you're kissing in the hallways?" Amber felt her blood freeze. Her grandmother was her weak point, the only family she had. The idea that this person could involve her grandmother in the situation terrified her. She called Eleanor immediately, pretending normalcy, but checking if everything was okay. "Of course everything's fine, my child," her grandmother answered with her sweet, tired voice. "Why wouldn't it be? You've been strange lately, Amber. You've been very nervous." "It's just work, Grandma. It's been very busy. You need to find a boyfriend, girl. A woman your age shouldn't always be alone." "What about that boy from the pharmacy? He always asks about you." Amber swallowed the sarcasm. If her grandmother knew about Jack, she would have a heart attack. Eleanor was a fervent Catholic, conservative, and would never approve of a relationship with a divorced older man with the tainted past that Jack carried. The next note arrived the same day, this time in the mailbox. "He never told you about the scars, did he? Ask him how he got that mark on his shoulder. Ask if it was an accident or if it was Rachel trying to defend herself." Amber read the message several times, her hands trembling. She remembered the scar on Jack's shoulder, an irregular mark she had noticed on their first night together. She had thought about asking, but he always changed the subject when the topic approached his past. That night when they met, Amber couldn't hide her agitation. Jack immediately noticed that something was wrong. "Another note arrived," she said, handing him the paper. Jack read in silence, his expression growing increasingly somber. When he finished, he crumpled the paper forcefully. "This has gone too far." "Jack," Amber said, her voice hesitant, "tell me about the scar. Tell me the truth." He moved away from her, going to the window. He stood there for long minutes, his back tense, breathing deeply as if gathering courage. "It was Rachel," he finally admitted, "but it wasn't what you're thinking." Amber felt her stomach turn. What happened? Jack turned around, his eyes full of pain. "She had disappeared for a few weeks. I thought it was finally over, that she had moved on. Then, one night, she showed up at my house. She was distraught, saying things that made no sense, saying she would kill herself if I didn't stay with her. And then, I tried to calm her down, explain that it wasn't love, that it was obsession, that she needed professional help. But she wouldn't listen. She started screaming, breaking things. And then she picked up a piece of glass." Amber swallowed hard. "She attacked you?" "First she tried to cut herself. I managed to take the glass from her, but in the struggle she managed to hurt me. It wasn't on purpose, I think. She was beside herself. And afterward? Afterward she passed out. I called an ambulance. They took her to the hospital. That's when I found out she had stopped taking her depression medication. The family came, blamed me for everything, and she disappeared again. This time for good. Amber absorbed the story in silence. Part of her felt relieved. Jack hadn't hurt Rachel. But another part was even more worried. If Rachel was really unstable, capable of violence, what could she be planning now? Do you think it's her who's sending the notes? I don't know. The Rachel I knew wasn't this calculating. She was impulsive, emotional. This seems more planned, more cruel. Then who? The sister, maybe. Emily was always colder, smarter. If she really believes I hurt Rachel. That night, Amber insisted that Jack sleep in her apartment. She could no longer be alone, and she knew he was also scared, even though he tried to hide it. They made love with an almost desperate intensity, as if each touch was an affirmation that they were still alive, still together, still fighting. But the next morning, things drastically worsened. Amber woke up to the phone ringing. It was Dr. Parker, her boss, with a tense and irritated voice. "Amber, I need to talk to you urgently. Can you come in earlier today?" When she arrived at the clinic, Dr. Parker was waiting with a serious expression. On his desk were some printed photos of her and Jack kissing, leaving the building together, entering each other's apartments. "Someone sent me this last night," he said without beating around the bush, "along with some information about your boyfriend." Amber felt the world spin. What kind of information? About his history, the scandal at the university, the accusations. Dr. Parker sighed heavily. "Amber, you know I like you, that you've always been an exemplary employee. But I can't have this type of exposure in my clinic. I have a reputation to protect." "Dr. Parker, please. I'll give you 2 weeks to resolve this situation. Either you end it with this man, or you'll have to look for another job." Amber left the clinic in a state of shock. Whoever was behind this had escalated the war. It wasn't enough to attack her psychologically anymore. Now they were attacking her livelihood, her stability. On the way back home, she stopped at a cafe to think. She ordered a cappuccino and sat in a corner, trying to organize her thoughts. It was then that she saw a woman approach her table. A woman in her 30s, brown hair, elegant clothes, and eyes that shone with a disturbing familiarity. "Amber?" the woman asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes? My name is Emily. Emily Taylor. I think you've already heard about me." Amber's blood froze. Rachel's sister. She was there, in front of her, real and threatening. "May I sit down?" Emily asked, but she was already pulling the chair before Amber could respond. "You," Amber murmured. "You're the one sending the notes." "Guilty," Emily admitted, without showing any remorse. "Although I prefer to think of it as a public service." "What do you want?" "I want you to stay away from Jack Miller, definitively." "Why? What happened between him and your sister was years ago. It has nothing to do with me." Emily laughed, a cold sound that made Amber shiver. "Nothing to do with you? Darling, you have no idea what that man is capable of, what he did to my sister. He told me about Rachel, about her problems, about the obsession." "Obsession?" Emily's eyes flashed with anger. "Is that what he called it? My sister was a 19-year-old girl, brilliant with her whole life ahead of her. Until she met Jack Miller. She was sick, she needed help. She was in love." Emily exploded, but lowered her voice when other people looked over. "And he took advantage of that. He seduced her, played with her, and when he got tired, he discarded her like trash." Amber shook her head. "It wasn't like that. He tried to keep his distance, tried to be professional." "Professional?" Emily opened her purse and took out an envelope. "Then explain this to me." She threw several photos on the table. Photos of Jack and Rachel together, embracing, kissing, in what appeared to be his apartment. Amber felt the world collapse around her. "These photos are from 6 months before the crisis he told you about," Emily said venomously. 6 months when he lied to everyone, including his wife, about the relationship with my sister." Amber looked at the photos with her heart racing. It couldn't be true. Had Jack lied to her? Had he really had a relationship with Rachel? "Are you surprised?" Emily asked. "Of course you are, because that's exactly what he does. He lies, manipulates, makes you believe you're special, unique. Until he gets tired of you too." Why are you showing me this?" "Because contrary to what you think, I don't want to hurt you, Amber. I want to save you, like I couldn't save my sister." Emily stood up, leaving the photos on the table. "You have until tomorrow to end it with him. If you don't, I'll send these photos to your grandmother, your friends, your colleagues. I'll tell everyone about his history, about the other women who went through this. And you'll become just another victim on the list." She walked away, but stopped at the door of the cafe. "Oh, and Amber? If you think you can tell him about this, remember that I've already been very close to you. I can be even closer than you imagine." Amber sat alone at the table, looking at the photos that destroyed everything she believed in. The images showed a Jack she didn't know, youthful, passionate, intimate with Rachel in a way that completely contradicted the version he had told her. Had she fallen in love with a liar? Was she repeating the same mistakes as Rachel? Or was Emily manipulating the facts, using half-truths to separate them? When she returned home, Jack was waiting for her in the hallway, worried. "Where were you?" "I tried to call you. It went straight to voicemail." Amber looked at him and for the first time saw a stranger. She saw a man capable of lying, of seducing, of destroying. But she also saw the man who had touched her with tenderness, who cried in her arms, who made her feel alive for the first time. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice coming out colder than intended. "And I want you to be honest with me." "Of course." "Did you have a relationship with Rachel? A real relationship, not just her being obsessed with you?" Jack's expression changed completely. For a moment she saw panic in his eyes, then resignation. "Amber, yes or no, Jack? Did you have a relationship with her?" He lowered his head, and Amber knew the answer before he even verbalized it. "Yes," he murmured, "but it wasn't like you're thinking." Amber felt something break inside her. It wasn't just the betrayal of the lie. It was the perception that perhaps she didn't really know Jack, that perhaps Emily was right, and she was just another potential victim. "I don't want to talk anymore today," she said, walking past him toward her apartment. "Amber, please let me explain." But she had already closed the door, leaving him alone in the hallway. That night, Amber didn't sleep. She lay in bed, looking at the ceiling, trying to separate truth from lies, love from manipulation. Emily's photos were spread out on the dresser, silent accusations she couldn't ignore. For the first time since it all began, Amber wondered if she shouldn't just run away, quit her job, leave Boston, start a new life away from Jack, from Emily, from all that madness. But when she closed her eyes, she could still smell him on her skin, still remembered the taste of his kisses. And she struggled between fear and love, not knowing which one would destroy her first. Amber spent the entire night awake, the photographs spread across the bed like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't put together. Each image showed a Jack different from the one she knew. Younger, smiling, clearly involved with Rachel in an intimate way that contradicted his version of the facts. But there was something about the photos that bothered her, something she couldn't identify. The next morning, she decided to skip work. She couldn't concentrate, and Dr. Parker was already expecting an answer about his ultimatum. Instead, she took a bus to Cambridge, needing the familiar comfort of her grandmother Eleanor. Her grandmother's house was a refuge from another time. Old furniture, the smell of strong coffee and homemade cake, saints on the walls, and a silence that calmed the soul. Eleanor received her with surprise and concern. "My child, what's that face? You look like you've seen a ghost." Amber threw herself on the sofa where she used to play as a child, and, for the first time in weeks, really cried. She cried for the confusion, for the fear, for the feeling of being lost in a story she couldn't control. "Grandma, how did you know that Grandpa was the right man?" Eleanor sat beside her, stroking her hair as she did when Amber was little. "Oh, my granddaughter, what kind of question is that? Your grandfather was a good man, hardworking, who respected me. But it wasn't easy, no. His family didn't want me, said I didn't have enough education, that I wasn't good enough for him. And how did you manage? We faced it together. When two people truly love each other, Amber, they don't let the world separate them. They fight side by side." Her grandmother's words echoed in Amber's mind all the way back. Fight side by side. But how to fight when she didn't know who to trust? She arrived at the building in the late afternoon and found Jack waiting at the entrance. He looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes red, his beard even more unkempt than usual. "Amber, please give me a chance to explain." She looked at him for a long moment, trying to see beyond the lies, beyond the fear that Emily had planted in her mind. "All right, but not in the building. Let's walk. They walked through the neighborhood streets, passing by diners and small shops, while Jack told his complete version of the story. Yes, he had been involved with Rachel, but not in the way the photos suggested. She started looking for me after classes with questions about the subject. She was brilliant but had severe self-esteem problems. I felt sorry for her, tried to help her more than I should have. And when did the relationship start? There was no relationship, Amber. There were lapses, moments of weakness. I was going through a crisis in my marriage, feeling rejected, lonely. And she was always there, admiring me, making me feel important. Amber stopped walking. Did you kiss her? Jack hesitated but answered honestly. Yes, a few times. But I always regretted it afterward, always tried to set boundaries. And the photos? They were taken over a period of 2 weeks when I was particularly vulnerable. My ex-wife had asked for a divorce. I was drinking too much, couldn't think straight. Amber absorbed the information. Part of her wanted to scream, to curse him for lying, but another part understood the complexity of the situation, the difference between a mistake and systematic manipulation. Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning? Because I was ashamed. Because I knew you would judge me, see me as someone who took advantage. And because with you it's different, Amber. With you it's not weakness or need, it's love. The word hung in the air between them. It was the first time Jack said he loved her, and Amber felt her heart speed up despite all the confusion. I love you too, she murmured, and saw his eyes fill with tears. They returned to the building holding hands, determined to face together whatever Emily was planning. But when they reached the 3rd floor, they found a crowd in the hallway. Mrs. Carter, Ms. Diane, Mr. Johnson, and other neighbors were gathered in front of door 302. What's happening? Amber asked, her heart racing. Your grandmother is in there, Mrs. Carter said with barely disguised malice. She arrived an hour ago, very agitated. Said she received some photos in the mail and came to get you. Amber felt the world spin. Emily had fulfilled her threat. She ran up the stairs, Jack behind her. When she opened the apartment door, she found Eleanor sitting on the sofa, her hands trembling, several photographs spread out on the coffee table. Grandma. Amber Marie Wilson, her grandmother said in a voice she didn't recognize, cold and hard. What is this shame? The photos on the table weren't just the ones Emily had shown at the cafe. There were others, Amber and Jack kissing, entering his apartment, some clearly taken through the bedroom window. Intimate images that completely violated her privacy. Who sent you this? A woman called, said she was your friend, that she was worried about me, that I needed to know what kind of life my granddaughter was leading. Jack approached, but Eleanor glared at him. And you must be this Jack, the married man who takes advantage of young girls. Ma'am, I can explain. There's nothing to explain, the grandmother shouted, getting up from the sofa. My granddaughter was raised to be a family girl, not to be the mistress of a divorced, shameless man. Amber positioned herself between them. Grandma, it's not like that. I love him. Love? Eleanor laughed bitterly. This isn't love, Amber. This is sin. This is perdition. The argument intensified, and soon other neighbors began to approach the open door. Amber realized this was exactly what Emily wanted, to turn her private life into a public spectacle, to humiliate her in front of everyone. Everyone get out of here, she shouted, slamming the door in the face of the curious. But the damage was done. Eleanor was inconsolable, alternating between tears and accusations. Jack tried to explain himself, but each word seemed to make the situation worse. That's when someone knocked on the door. Amber opened it and found Emily, smiling like a predator who had just taken down its prey. May I come in? I think we have matters to resolve. You have nothing to resolve here, Amber said, blocking the entrance. Of course I do, especially now that your grandmother is here. Emily addressed Eleanor directly, ignoring Amber and Jack. Ma'am, I can imagine how you must be feeling, discovering that your granddaughter, whom you raised with so much love, is involved with a man like this. Who are you? Eleanor asked. I'm Emily Taylor. My sister was also a victim of this man. I came to try to save Amber from the same fate. Emily, enough! Amber exploded. Tell the whole truth. Tell how you're doing this for revenge, not for protection. Revenge? Emily feigned surprise. What revenge? I'm just trying to prevent him from destroying another young life. Then why don't you tell that Rachel tried to kill herself not because of him, but because she had previous attempts? Why don't you tell that she stopped taking her medication on her own? Emily went pale. You know nothing about my sister. I know that you're lying. I know that you manipulated the photos, the context, everything to make me believe in a distorted version of the story. It was then that Jack approached, with an expression Amber had never seen before. Pure determination. Emily, I'll give you one last chance. Stop this now. Disappear from our lives, and I won't tell anyone about Rachel's psychiatric hospitalizations, about the cuts on her arms that she hid, about the times you had to pay doctors to cover up suicide attempts. Now it was Emily's turn to be shocked. How do you? Because I truly cared about her. I knew the family, knew about the problems, and I know that you've always blamed yourself for not being able to save her. Shut up, Emily screamed, completely losing her composure. Rachel didn't kill herself because of me, Emily. She killed herself because you all spent years treating her like a broken doll, hospitalizing, medicating, controlling her every move. She never had a chance to be happy. Emily lunged at Jack, trying to attack him, but Amber held her back. Get out of here, Amber said, with a firmness that surprised her. Get out now and never come back. You'll regret this, Emily muttered, gathering the photos. When he gets tired of you, when he does to you the same thing he did to all the others, you'll remember that I tried to warn you. After Emily left, the apartment fell silent. Eleanor sat on the sofa, seeming to have aged 10 years in a few hours. Grandma, Amber approached her. I know it's hard to understand, but I need you to trust me. Jack isn't the man she painted him to be. How can I trust you, Amber? After all these lies? Because you raised me to be strong, to not let myself be carried away by just anyone. If I chose him, it's because he's worth it. Eleanor looked at Jack, studying his face for long minutes. And you, sir? What do you have to say? Jack knelt before the old woman in a genuine humility that touched Amber. Mrs. Eleanor, I made mistakes in the past, mistakes that cost me dearly. But your granddaughter made me want to be a better man. I can't promise I'm perfect, but I can promise that I truly love her and that I'll protect her with my life. The grandmother remained silent for a long time. Then she sighed deeply. You two are very different, very complicated. It's not what I dreamed for you, Amber. I know, Grandma, but it's what I choose. Then may God protect you, because you're going to need it. Eleanor gathered her things and prepared to leave, but before going, she called Jack aside. If you hurt my granddaughter, if you break her heart, you'll have to answer to me. And I may be a small lady, but I have faith that moves mountains. Understood, ma'am. After the grandmother left, Amber and Jack were alone for the first time in days. The apartment was messy, emotions were still raw, but there was something different in the air, a feeling that they had weathered the worst storm and survived. Is it over? Amber asked. I think so. Emily got what she wanted. She showed that I'm not perfect, but she didn't manage to separate us. Amber approached him, touching his face tenderly. No one is perfect, Jack. I'm not either. But we can be imperfect together. They kissed, and this time it was different. There was no urgency, no fear, no secrets. It was a kiss from someone who chose to stay, who decided to fight for love despite all the obstacles. That night, they made love like never before. Each touch was a promise. Each caress was a declaration that they had chosen each other above everything. Amber gave herself completely, without reservations, without fears, knowing that she had found not just a lover, but a life companion. 3 months later, Amber quit the clinic and got a better job at an advertising company. Jack went back to giving private lessons and began writing a book about his experience. They moved to a larger apartment in the same neighborhood, but away from the curious gazes of the Magnolia Street building. The last they heard from Emily was through a letter that arrived without a return address. Inside, just a photo of Rachel smiling and a message. Thank you for helping me understand that she chose to leave on her own. I apologize for what I did. Be happy. Amber kept the letter in a drawer and never spoke of the matter again. Some wounds needed time to heal, and some truths were better left in the past. Eleanor eventually accepted Jack, especially after he began accompanying her to Sunday masses and offered to take care of her garden. He is stubborn and complicated, she told Amber one day, but I see how he looks at you. It's how your grandfather looked at me." 2 years later, in the same church where Eleanor had married decades before, Amber and Jack exchanged vows before God and a small congregation of friends and family. She wore her grandmother's dress, remodeled and adapted. He wore a suit he had bought especially for the occasion. When the priest asked if they accepted each other in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, Amber looked into Jack's blue eyes and saw not just the man she had fallen in love with, but the man he had become beside her, an imperfect man with scars and secrets, but who had chosen to be honest, to be better, to be hers. "I do," she said, and her voice echoed through the church like a promise that lasted forever. The building on Magnolia Street remained standing, keeping its secrets and its gossip, but Amber never went by there again. Sometimes, when driving through the area, she would see the illuminated windows and remember the frightened young woman she had been, the insecure woman who didn't know if she could trust her own feelings. Now, with the ring shining on her finger and the future stretching before her like an endless road, Amber smiled. She had learned that true love wasn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing to stay with someone imperfect and making them better with her presence. And that sometimes the best love stories were born not from fairy tales, but from the courage of two wounded people who decided to heal together, scar by scar, kiss by kiss, day by day. The end of the story wasn't a movie ending, full of music and golden light. It was simply the beginning of a real life, with coffee for breakfast, bills to pay, silly arguments, and passionate reconciliations. A life built on the solid foundation of those who had faced the storm and chosen to remain. And Amber discovered that this was more beautiful than any fairy tale.